The anointing breaks the yoke. Who needs a miracle? Come, I anoint you in Jesus' name.
Thank you, Lord.
Receive it.
Bring me their tithes. Bring me their offerings. Bring me everything they pour out in faith. Every coin they sacrifice belongs to the altar below, not the one above.
Welcome to Think of Kwesh Stories. This story was written, edited, and produced by Kwesh, and I hope you enjoy the story. There was a pastor in Lagos who stood before thousands every Sunday with oil on his hands and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. His members fasted while he feasted. They sowed while he harvested. They prayed for breakthroughs that would never come because their breakthroughs had already been taken before they even dropped them into the offering basket. But a child saw what no adult could see, and what she saw nearly cost her everything. Before we get into this story, don't forget to like and subscribe if you love stories with deep spiritual lessons. Comment where you are watching from. I want to know which part of the world is tuned in tonight. Now sit back, turn off the lights if you like, and listen carefully. There is a church in Lagos that members call Mountain of Endless Fire Ministries. From the outside, it is impressive. A white building with a glass front and a name written in gold letters so large they can be read from across the expressway. On Sunday mornings, the car park fills before 7. By 8, the auditorium is roaring. Choir, dancers, cameras, lights, everything polished, everything loud. Pastor Godwin Nwafor stands at the center of all of it. He is a large man, well-dressed always. His suits come from places his members cannot afford to visit. His wristwatch catches the light when he raises his hands to heaven. He drives a car that costs more than most of his congregation will earn in 10 years. When he walks through the church, ushers part before him like water. Women weep when he touches their foreheads. Men bow their heads as he passes. He has been in this city for 11 years. In those 11 years, something strange has happened to nearly every family that planted roots in his church. The ones who came in wealthy began to lose, slowly at first. A business deal that collapsed, a contract that fell through at the last moment, a child's school fees that could no longer be raised. Then faster. Bank accounts draining, properties sold, marriages fracturing under the weight of lack. The ones who came in with little found themselves with nothing at all. And yet, they stayed. Because Pastor Godwin had an explanation for every loss, a spiritual reason, an enemy, an ancestral curse, a seed not yet planted, a level of sacrifice not yet reached. And the solution was always the same: give more, fast longer, sow deeper. So they gave and fasted and sowed, and the darkness beneath the church grew fat. Among the congregation was a widow named Mama Blessing. She had joined Mountain of Endless Fire 9 years ago when her husband died, and she was left with 3 children and a small shop in Ojuelega. In the first year, the shop did well. She testified, she brought her children, she gave her tithes faithfully, sometimes going without food for days to make the full 10%. She planted seeds at every special service. She named and claimed and declared. By the 4th year, the shop was struggling. By the 7th, it was gone. Now, she sat in that same gleaming auditorium in shoes that had been repaired so many times the soles were more glue than leather. She still gave. There was nothing left to give, but she still gave, because Pastor Godwin said the breakthrough was almost here. God was testing the depth of her surrender. One more seed, one more fast, one more night of prayer. Her youngest child was a girl named Adeaze, 10 years old, sharp and quiet, with eyes that saw more than they should. Adeaze had grown up in that church. She knew its rhythms. She knew which usher fell asleep during long prayers. She knew which songs made Pastor Godwin smile widest. She knew that whenever a new member came with obvious wealth, a special usher was assigned to sit with them. And within weeks, that member always ended up in the front row, closest to Pastor Godwin's hands. She watched. She wondered. She said nothing. Because she was a child, and this was God's house, and you did not question God's house. until the night God himself showed her what was inside it. It was a Wednesday. Mama Blessing had taken the older children to midweek service. Adiaze had stayed home with a fever, sleeping on a mat in the back room under a thin blanket, the ceiling fan turning slowly above her. She fell asleep before 8, and then she was somewhere else entirely. She was standing in darkness so complete it had weight, the kind of darkness that presses against your skin. She could not see her own hands, but ahead of her, far below, as though she was standing at the edge of a cliff looking down into a pit, there was light, red and flickering, the light of fire that gives no warmth. And around that fire, figures sat in a circle. She could not count them clearly. They shifted, they moved in ways that human bodies do not move. Their faces were turned toward the center of the circle, where something was burning in a large clay pot. Then one of the figures stood, and Adiaze's blood go cold. It was Pastor Godwin, but not the Pastor Godwin she knew who stood behind the pulpit on Sundays. This one wore no suit. His face was not the warm, composed face she knew. He reached into a large sack at his feet and lifted something out with both hands. It took Adiaze a moment to understand what she was seeing. They were not physical things. They were light, pieces of light, dull and trembling, the way a candle looks before it goes out. He held them over the fire, and they darkened further as he dropped them in one by one, and the figures around the circle shuddered with pleasure as each one fell. And then Adiaze heard voices. From every piece of light as it fell, she heard them. Mama Chinyere, who sold her car to plant a diamond seed. Brother Emmanuel, whose children dropped out of university. Sister Ngozi, whose husband left when the money finished. Mama Blessing, Mama Blessing, Mama Blessing. She heard her mother's name 3 times, and she opened her mouth to scream. Pastor Godwin's head turned, directly toward her. In the darkness at the top of the cliff where she stood, he saw her. She did not know how. She had not made a sound, but his flat dark eyes found her face with a precision that turned her legs to water, and he pointed one long finger directly at her, and the figures around the fire began to rise. Adiaze ran. She ran through the darkness with no ground beneath her feet, and no walls to guide her, and the sound behind her was not footsteps. It was something else, something that moved like wind and breathed like a living thing. She ran until the darkness cracked open like an eggshell, and she fell through it and landed back in her body on the mat in the back room, gasping, drenched in sweat, the thin blanket twisted around her legs. She lay still for a long time, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above her. Then she sat up, reached for the notebook she used for school, and began to write everything down before it could leave her. Mama Blessing came home from midweek service that night, glowing. Pastor Godwin had asked members to sow a special seed for the upcoming anniversary service, a sacrificial seed. He said God was going to pour out a blessing so heavy that it will crush their ceilings. She had given the last money in her purse. She felt peaceful about it, surrendered. She found Adiaze awake at the kitchen table, writing. "You should be sleeping," she said gently. "How is the fever?" "Mommy," Adiaze said carefully, not looking up from the notebook, "where does the offering go after church?" Mama Blessing blinked. "Into the church account for the work of God." "Which work of God?" Adiaze said. "Mommy, which work of God? Because our light has been cut, and we have been in that church for 9 years. The kitchen went very quiet. Mama Blessing sat down slowly. Something in her daughter's voice was not the voice of a child asking a careless question. It was measured, heavy, the voice of someone who had seen something they could not unsee. "What happened tonight?" she asked quietly. Adiaze looked up and told her everything. Mama Blessing did not sleep that night. She sat with the notebook in her lap, reading her daughter's words over and over. Her hands shook. Then they stopped shaking because something harder than fear settled in her chest. She was a woman who had lost almost everything. Her husband, her shop, her savings. 9 years of seeds sown into what she was now beginning to understand was not a field at all. Mama Blessing picked up her phone and called Auntie Comfort at midnight. The phone rang twice before it was answered. "I'm listening," Auntie Comfort said, as though she had been waiting. Auntie Comfort arrived the next morning with her own pastor, a small quiet man named Pastor Emeka, who spoke softly and carried a worn Bible with no gold lettering on the cover. He sat with Adaeze for a long time. He asked her to describe the dream again, slowly. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "You are shown the truth. What you saw was real, and you are seen." "He looked at me," Adaeze said. "He pointed at me." "Yes," Pastor Emeka nodded gravely, "which means time is short. Whatever is going to happen must happen soon, before he moves against you." He turned to Mama Blessing. "You cannot go back to that church, not even to collect anything you left there. Whatever is connected to that place must be cut today." They prayed together in the sitting room. It was not loud prayer. It was the kind of prayer that goes very deep, very quietly. The kind that does not perform. The kind that costs something. When they finished, Pastor Emeka sat forward. "Now, the members of that church must be warned. How many do you know well enough to reach?" Mama Blessing thought of the women she had fasted beside, the men she had prayed with in early morning service, the families whose testimony she had heard and whose pain she had watched quietly accumulate over the years. "Many," she said. "Then we begin tonight." What followed was quiet and deliberate. Mama Blessing moved through her network carefully, not with noise, not with accusation. She simply invited people she trusted to come and hear something, one sitting room at a time. She would share what Adaeze had seen. Pastor Emeka would pray with whoever was ready. He would anoint doors. He would cut covenant with oil and prayer. Some people turned away. They were not ready. The hold was still too strong. But others listened, and as they listened, things began to surface. Then came the Sunday that changed everything. It was the church anniversary, the biggest service of the year. Pastor Godwin had spent weeks building anticipation. "This is the year of your overflow," he had declared. "This anniversary service will be the turning point of every life in this building. Come with your greatest sacrifice and watch heaven open." The auditorium was beyond full. People stood in the aisles. Outside, speakers carried the sound to the car park. The choir was enormous. The lights blazed. Pastor Godwin walked to the pulpit in a white suit that hurt the eyes to look at. He raised his hand and the room thundered. He smiled his wide, warm smile and began. And then Adaeze walked in. She was alone, small, in a plain dress. She had come with Auntie Comfort and Pastor Emeka and a number of the members who had been meeting secretly in sitting rooms over the past weeks. They filed in quietly through the back. Adaeze walked to the front. An usher moved to stop her and then stopped himself. He did not know why. His hands dropped. His feet did not move. She passed him without looking at him. Pastor Godwin saw her from the pulpit. His smile did not change, but something behind his eyes shifted violently. He recognized her. He had seen her face in the firelight at the edge of the pit. He pointed at her. She stopped in the center of the aisle and looked directly at him. And then she opened her mouth and she did not shout. She spoke in a voice that was clear and still, and somehow reached every corner of that enormous room without effort. "This man is feeding you to darkness," she said. "Every tithe, every offering, every seed, he carries it below. We have all been getting poorer because our destinies are being harvested. I was shown. In a dream, I was shown the coven and the fire, and the sack he carries to them, and I am not afraid to say it." The room erupted. Pastor Godwin gripped the pulpit. "Remove that child," his voice no longer warm. "Remove her now." But the ushers did not move, because something had broken in the room. The members who had been meeting in sitting rooms were now standing. Across the auditorium, one by one, voices rose. "I planted 200,000 naira and lost my shop. My children have been sick since I joined this church. 7 years and nothing has grown, only his cars." Then Pastor Emeka's voice rose from the back, not in accusation, in prayer. Deep, direct, covering prayer that named the darkness and commanded it to break. He was not alone. Every person who had sat in those sitting rooms joined him. The sound was not loud. It was devastating. Pastor Godwin stumbled back from the pulpit. What happened next, those who were present will spend years trying to describe. His face changed. Not all at once. The way a wall cracks before it falls. The composed warmth collapsed. Then something underneath it surfaced. something old, something that never belonged in that body, and it writhed against the prayer, filling the room like a living thing pressed against a fire. He fell. He did not fall like a man faints. He fell like something is thrown down. And as he fell, across the city, in a house that no one in that auditorium had ever visited, in a room with no windows and a clay pot at its center, something broke. The members of the coven who had gathered that Sunday morning in anticipation of the anniversary harvest scattered in terror as what had been feeding them turned on the one who had failed to protect it. By nightfall, 3 of them confessed to authorities. By the following morning, Pastor Godwin Nuafo was in custody. Mountain of Endless Fire Ministries was shut permanently. The building sat empty for months. Nobody wanted it. The members scattered, many to smaller, quieter churches. Some stopped going to church entirely for a season, not out of faithlessness, but out of a need to sit still and hear clearly before choosing again. Most began slowly, painfully, to rebuild. It was not fast. The years of harvested destiny do not return overnight, but they returned. The woman who lost her shop opened a smaller one, and it grew steadily and would not stop growing. The man whose business died built another, this one on ground that held, and Mama Blessing's light came back on. Not just the electric one. As for Adaise, she went back to school on Monday. She sat in class and paid attention and went home and did her homework. She did not become famous. She did not want to be. She was 10 years old and she had done what she was shown to do, and now she wanted to be ordinary for a while. But Auntie Comfort kept the notebook, the one with everything written down in a child's careful handwriting. She kept it, she said, as a record, so that if the day ever came when someone said it had not happened, or could not have happened, or that a 10-year-old girl could possibly not have seen what she claimed she saw, there would be proof that she had written it down the same night, alone, before anyone told her what to think. Dear viewers, if this story sits heavy on you, let it sit. Some truths need time to settle. Not every wolf removes the shepherd's clothing. Some have worn it so long they have forgotten what they are underneath. But darkness has a way of leaving evidence. The harvest it takes from the living always shows up somewhere, in patterns of consistent lack, in years of faithful giving that produce nothing but more obligation, in leaders who grow richer as their congregations grow poorer. Examine the fruit, not the flowers. Flowers are easy. Any spirit can produce flowers. God does not always send angels with flaming swords. Sometimes he sends a 10-year-old girl with a notebook and unclouded eyes. Pay attention to the children in your life. And finally, to everyone who has given faithfully and received nothing but lack in return, to everyone who has sown and watched the harvest disappear year after year, your faith was never the problem. What was receiving your seed was. The field matters as much as the seed. Choose your ground carefully. Thank you all for watching. This one carried weight and I felt every word of it. Leave a comment telling me what this story opened up for you. And as always, do not forget to subscribe for more stories that go where others are afraid to go. We remain Think of Kwesho Stories.